Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. I bow at the lotus feet of my Guru Paramhansa Yogananda, and I bow to his great lineage of Gurus, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, and Swami Shri Yukteswar Giri, and I bow to my divine friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda. So friends, the last time I recorded these videos, we left the story, like I said, at the absolute low point in this entire story of Mahabharata. We were looking at the game of dice, from being emperors of the land, from having all kinds of riches and prosperity, from having what seemed like eternal happiness. In a matter of hours, the Pandava brothers are sitting in the court of Hastinapura as slaves of Duryodhana and the Kaurava brothers. They have lost everything they ever owned. They have even gone to the extent of losing Draupadi, their own wedded wife, and now all 5 of them, including their wife, all 6 of them, are slaves of the Kaurava brothers. It's just unbearable to even watch the story. And all this happens because of that one misstep that Yudhishthira takes. Out of his desire for appeasement, for having some kind of harmony with the kingdom of Hastinapura and with Dhristashtra and Duryodhana, he says yes to this game of gambling, thinking it might offend them if he says no. And despite knowing very well that it is against Dharma and it is not going to lead to highest good. And the story is very instructive for us, because as much as we are grounded in our own spiritual practices and faith, it is really important for us to treat delusion with the respect it deserves. Oftentimes, we find ourselves drawn through the satanic pull of Maya into that world, and we want to play that game of dice. We want to gamble. How about I indulge here just a bit? How about I just let this one desire be there? How about I just have this one? How is that going to take me away from my spiritual path? How is that going to draw me out of my own center? And with that conviction, we enter that stage of gambling, and before we realize, in a matter of minutes, in a matter of hours, we find ourselves losing our ground, losing everything that we thought was our own, now is taken away by that pull of Maya. And that's really what we are seeing played out in this stage. Yudhishthira loses everything, his kingdom, his riches. He bets on his brothers, and now all 4 of his brothers are slaves, and he goes to the extent of betting on himself, and hence becoming the slave of Duryodhana. And at this point, he has nothing else left. And the Kaurava brothers are prodding him, and he bets on Draupadi, his own wife, and she is also lost in this game of gambling. Because the dice is loaded, that's really what the story of Mahabharata is trying to teach us. That dice that Shakuni is rolling, it is loaded in favor of delusion. Once you are on this material plane, there is an inherent tilt that is favoring the side of delusion and favoring the side of Maya. So the wiser part of us is not to enter that game of gambling with some kind of conviction that we can stay grounded no matter what happens, but rather to use our own spiritual discipline as a safeguard to protect us from being pulled into these temptations. That's really what the story is instructing us. And at this point, Duryodhana orders Dushasana, his own brother, to get Draupadi into the stage so that she can be insulted. As we already saw, Duryodhana as a symbol for material desires. We called him King Material Desire, as actually Yogananda called him that name. And Dushasana is a symbol for anger. And not just in this episode, whenever desires are thwarted, whenever Duryodhana is thwarted or he comes into lead, he immediately brings Dushasana along with him, because it is illustrative of that point that desires lead to anger. In fact, the story would be incomplete without discussing a few verses from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is beautifully explaining what is at play here, what is exactly happening in the arena. In the 2nd chapter, in verses 62 and 63, Krishna talks about this whole process of degeneration. He says, by dwelling on the object of senses, attachment is born. And from attachment comes desires. And that's really what we see here. Attachment, Shakuni, who is a symbol for attachments, leads way to Duryodhana, as Krishna says, Sangha jayate kamaha, attachment leads to desire. And kama krodho bijayate, kama, material desires, as we see represented in Duryodhana, he is going to lead way to Dushasana. What happens after that? He says, from krodha comes some moha, or clouding of judgment. We see all these characters, all mental citizens, Bhishma, Dhritarashtra, Vidura, Drona, Kripa, all of them sitting in the stage, unable to do anything because that judgment has been clouded. They are not able to question Duryodhana. They have no power in front of this drama that is playing in front of their own eyes, despite fully being aware this is not justful. And what happens after that? From that clouding of judgment, Krishna says there is smriti vibhramaha, there is forgetfulness of our own true self, of our true nature. From then we lose discrimination. It keeps going on and on. Essentially, it's a downward spiral that we get into. And Krishna beautifully explains it, and that's what we see played out in the story, in that arena, as it is set in that stage of Hastinapura. So, Duryodhana orders Dushasana to go fetch Draupadi and bring her into the stage, and Dushasana walks into the quarters of the queen and orders that Draupadi, who now rightfully belongs to the Kaurava brothers and Shakuni, come along with him to be presented in front of her new owners. Now Draupadi is Kundalini energy. She is the incarnation of power. She's not going to just say yes to somebody like that walking into her own quarters and demanding that she come with him. She refuses and resists, but Duryodhana, who is that brute force of passion, he drags her by the hair and brings her into that court, into the stage of Hastinapura. A lot of us who grew up in India have seen dramatized versions of the story, and this particular scene is just so poignant and shocking and dramatic to even watch. You see Draupadi standing there, being dragged into the stage by Dushasana, completely enraged and questioning everybody there as to what is really fair and how justice can be completely vanquished in this fashion. And you see all the Pandava brothers sitting there, embarrassed, their heads down in shame. You see the Kaurava brothers and Shakuni gloating and beaming with joy, this joy of feeling that they have won, of this newfound victory, and thinking that they've completely gotten rid of the Pandava brothers. And you also see all the other characters, Dhritarashtra, Bhishma, Drona, Vidura, all of them bearing witness. Just this helpless feeling in their faces, not knowing what to do, not being able to step in and stop Duryodhana. That scene is just one that is so vivid that even if you have not seen, you can easily imagine in your own minds. And Draupadi, as I said, is completely enraged, and she starts questioning Yudhishthira and the Pandava brothers. How could you think that I am a property that you could just claim ownership for and bet on my behalf? That was not dharma. That is not just in itself. And she questions Dhritarashtra and Bhishma. How could they see this happen in front of them? How would they not intervene and re-establish justice when it has been taken so far? How could they bear witness to this kind of a disarray unfolding in front of their eyes? But the whole stage is silent. Nobody is able to respond to her. All that she hears is the ridicule from Duryodhana, Karna, and the Kaurava brothers, who are insulting her, ridiculing her, questioning her chastity. And at this point, Duryodhana has completely had enough, and he says, this woman has to be put in her place. She's after all a property that belongs to me. And he orders Dushasana to disrobe her in front of all these men. The story takes a really ugly turn here, and Dushasana starts pulling off Draupadi's sari, the garment that is covering her body. At this point, Draupadi realizes that nobody here can do anything to save her. In fact, they're all completely powerless in front of Shakuni and Duryodhana, who have now taken control of that field of consciousness. And she knows there's only one hope. At this point in the story, she and the Pandava brothers have already pledged their loyalty to that Guru consciousness, to Krishna, their friend and guide, who they know is their only hope, and who they know will always lead them to their own greater good. So Draupadi stands there, completely still and centered, offering herself in reverence and self-offering into the light, into the grace of Krishna. And as soon as she does, the whole stage shifts, an astral vibration descends, and again, in the movies or the dramatized versions of the story, you see Dushasana pulling on her sari, with all his force, and as he's pulling, there's fabric coming out of it, and there's this huge mound of cloth that is building up. But despite him pulling again and again, Draupadi still remains fully clothed. Her honor is intact, and she is not actually disrobed at all because Krishna is protecting her. There's this infinite yardage, I would say, of fabric that is covering her body somehow through grace and as a miracle, and Dushasana can never pull all of that enough, and you see piles of fabric building up, and Dushasana is just tired trying to pull and disrobe Draupadi, and then he falls on the ground knowing that he cannot disrobe her. And at this point, people start to wake up to their senses. The story, as dramatic and as intense as it sounds, the message is very positive. It looks shocking to see it played in that fashion, but in fact it is not all that uncommon or shocking at all, because if you look at the world outside, we see for ourselves in the culture that we live in the age that we live in, most people don't have an objective moral compass. Most people in this world live as if the world of senses and sensory indulgence is a goal in itself. There is no higher reality for them to tune into, and that is an abuse of that Kundalini energy. When we start living through our senses, driven by passion, and when the only objective of life is that fulfillment that comes through our own senses, then all that we are doing is disrobing Draupadi. All that we are doing is abusing that God-given Kundalini energy that is inside of us. So, as much as the dramatization of it is so shocking to look at, it is in fact the reality that is far too common to us in the times we live in. And the positive message here is, no matter how much that human will is going to abuse that Kundalini power and is going to disrobe Draupadi, it is in fact a divine seed, a divine potential. The Pandava brothers and Draupadi are human but not. They are divine in their own true nature, and they're always being protected by grace. And in a matter of one incarnation, you don't see Draupadi being provoked and the Mahabharata war being played out in every man's life. But over a period of time, over incarnations, we see that this abuse of that Kundalini energy is provoking that spiritual virtue to rise up. And eventually, when she does arise, she is going to flow like a river of fire, burning every obstacle standing on her way until she finds her true seat in that 1,000-petal lotus at this chakra in the head. So the story that we are seeing is far too common to us to be living in this world and to see how often we live through passion, we live through anger, we live through self-indulgence, abusing that God-given power, abusing that divine potential that is inside of us. And one fine day, whether in this incarnation or not, through grace, that power, that potential is always protected, and it is going to arise and lead to our own liberation. That is in fact the message of this story. Now, Dhristashtra and Bhishma and all of them start to wake up a little bit now that Draupadi has been provoked, and they try to stop what is happening. They try to start taking control, and Dhristashtra at this point, who represents the mind, again, he gets extremely anxious. He is now so afraid of Draupadi. He knows that she is no ordinary woman, that she is being protected by a divine flow of grace, and he steps in to apologize to Draupadi and to tell her, to make sure she doesn't burn him or do another miracle to completely vaporize every character in that story standing in that stage. And at this point, Draupadi is no longer even engaging in that human level. She is as Vyasa describes it, she's almost emanating fire, because that's what that Kundalini energy is. And at this point, she completely is disappointed with her husbands, and she questions again, and she curses Duryodhana and the Kaurava brothers, and she asks that herself and her 5 husbands be freed from the slavedom that has been imposed on them through this unfair game of dice. And Dhristashtra concedes to that request. And anyway, Bhishma and others step in as well. The story comes to an end. The game of dice comes to an end with Dhristashtra stepping in and all the elders and the Pandavas reaching to an agreement that they will be freed. They are no longer slaves of the Kaurava brothers. They will be let to go on their own. But the kingdom will not be given back to them. As a compromise with the Kaurava brothers, who feel that they have rightfully won all of this in that game of dice, they say they will retain control of Indraprastha, and they will have all the riches that belong to the Pandavas. The Pandavas, if they want to get it back, if they want their kingdom back, they have to go through a phase of extreme austerity in order to repent for a period of 13 years. The first 12 years of that period, they have to live an extremely simple life in the forest without coming into contact with anyone else. And live by themselves in seclusion, in austerity, without any belongings. And in the 13th year of this period of austerity, they have to live disguised in roles that completely conceals their identity. And if anybody finds them, recognizes the Pandava brothers during that time, then they'll have to restart, and they have to go through the same 13-year cycle all over again. What does all this mean in terms of symbolism? We will get to see in the next episode, but that's what is imposed on them. And the Pandava brothers accept that imposition. Now they walk out of the court of Hastinapura. Their head is no longer dropped down. Their head is held high, because they know that they're entering a period of extreme spiritual austerity that they need to follow with great discipline to build their own spiritual power, to come back, to gain justice. And they walk out of the court of Hastinapura with Draupadi along with them into this next phase of their life. So we will come back in the next episode and see what they do, what happens in the 12 years, and what it really represents. And again, that interesting 13th year, what they do then, and what happens when they come back after these 13 years of austerity. Until then, God bless you all.